Hi, this is Sarah with Learn Better. Welcome to your Learn Better mini lesson on learning modalities. Today, I'm going to look at 3 different modalities that you can use when training, talk about the positives and negatives of each so that you can do 2 things. Number 1, pick the right one that suits what you're looking to have your learners gain from it. And number 2, so that you can kind of lean in and leverage the positive aspects of that modality that aren't possible if you were to choose a different modality. Let's go ahead and jump in. Modality number 1 is the in-person instructor-led training. Sometimes I feel like this is the dream because bringing people together, having that live synergy of everybody in a room creates a different dynamic than if you're going to do it virtually. So I like to point out, if you're going to bring people together to have these live sessions, you really want to think about how can you encourage more discussions, more people interacting with each other because they are in the room, okay? Speaking of people moving around, adding physical movement, oh, that's a bird. Okay, excuse you. Having physical movement in your training actually helps more oxygen go to your learners' brains, which increases engagement. Kind of to that point as well, one other benefit of having people together is to be able to create some type of physical project that reflects the learning you've done as a group. So if you are practicing using some type of tool or process change in your company and you really need people to get it, maybe you have some type of physical thing on the table where your employees are mapping this out because they're physically interacting with the content, they're critically thinking, they're figuring out how do I want to demonstrate this with something physical that is going to create lasting learning in their brain, okay? The other piece of having people together is using proximity to increase engagement and attention. Walking around the room to different parts will really help your learners to be more engaged with what you're talking about, simply because you're closer to them. The other critical benefit of bringing people together is what you can do before, during, and after trainings. It's those little micro moments when you can say, hey, how's your family? How are you? What's going on? How was that race last weekend? What was the new Lego build you did with your family? All of those little side conversations are deposits of engagement and connection. The more connection you have with the people in your classes, in your trainings, the more engaged they're going to be in the learning, and really that's what we care about. The next piece I like to call in is just a really obvious one for me. When you're in person, you can bring food. Bring the food. Tell people to bring the food. We're gonna do a potluck at this training today. That makes it a lot more interesting, and honestly, if you do it kind of a potluck style, which is maybe not as traditional in a corporate setting, I love kind of disrupting corporate norms. It's a great way to kind of have people bring parts of who they are in through food. And so, hey, this is a delicious dessert that you brought in. Thank you for bringing that in. Where did you find that recipe? Oh, it was my grandmother's. Awesome, cool, building connection. Food tastes good. Food makes everything really so much better. So that is a benefit of having a live instructor-led training. Let's talk about the downside. One of the downsides of live instruction in person is that you are simply limited to a specific radius that you can bring people in from. Okay, so maybe it's a 2-hour threshold where anyone who lives within 2 hours of our company, they're gonna come in. That's not always the way companies operate, especially after the pandemic. We have so many more remote workers. It is very expensive to fly people in. All of those different factors definitely weigh on the limitations of a live in-person training. All right, so let's talk about learning modality number 2, instructor-led, but in a virtual setting. What is the key benefit here? It's a lot of crossover between the instructor-led in-person training, but you can really engage with people all around the world or people all around the United States. You are not limited to geography when you have a virtual instructor-led course. Number 2, when you are doing things virtually, you can still do some of those really impactful group type of learning experiences where you put people in breakout rooms maybe and you have them talk about something. The benefit is that you still have two-way conversation that can happen, albeit virtually, right? So something as simple as asking a group a question and having them respond is something that you can do virtually, where you cannot do that with our third modality, which is asynchronous learning or e-learning. We'll get into that in a minute. So when you are thinking about this information, think about like, if I'm doing something virtually, but it's an instructor-led course, leverage the fact that people can talk to each other, ask questions, and work together to solve a problem. Okay? You want to be thinking about how can I get people into deeper levels of engagement in their brain. Talking to people, interacting with people is still possible in a virtual setting. Now, the other benefit right now of using a virtual instructor-led course is that's kind of the way that people are used to learning right now. So people have this kind of built-in skill set of being able to use some of the technology tools in these video conferencing softwares. So for example, maybe you want to use a poll and ask people to vote on a question. Maybe you want to ask them a question as a way to kind of check their understanding and have people submit their questions through some of those different tools you can use. A tool that I love to use in video conferencing software is a group whiteboard. I love to put it up where everybody can sign in from their own computers. We're all on this learning call, but you're able to have people write and process in real time and kind of interact with each other's thoughts using a whiteboard software. So if you're not familiar with that, do some research and see how you can use that in one of your upcoming trainings. Another thing to think about is when you have a virtual instructor-led course is inviting guest speakers from different parts of your organization to come in and talk about something that will really help your learners lock into the content of the training. So for example, maybe you're talking about a brand new tool that you are offering in your company. Bring in a member from your development team and have them talk about the product in a way that, quite frankly, you just can't. Or maybe you invite a guest speaker that really helps to share their story with your employees as a way to engage them thinking about the content from a different perspective. So I guess my point here is that your virtual instructor-led course doesn't have to be just you talking. You can bring in different people to help engage your learners from a different perspective. Okay, so let's talk about the downside of a virtual instructor-led course. I think the most obvious thing that comes to my mind, first of all, is that people are sitting behind a computer and you don't necessarily know if they're checking their email or how engaged they are. They might be, doing some different type of work, or, you just never really know. And so engagement can be really tough as a training leader in a virtual space. The way that I kind of mitigate that, and this isn't what this mini lesson is really about, but I wanted to call it out, is just to say, hey, everybody, I would love it if you would please turn off your notifications, and here is why. We are going to do some really intentional learning today, and the more present you are, the more likely you are to retain and develop the skills and content in your brain that we're focusing on here today, which can ultimately help you do better in this capacity. Another negative of having a virtual instructor-led course is typically it's just offered at one time. And so this limits who can attend because it is a set time. The last limitation is that you can't have everybody bring in food, which is a big negative. But you can encourage people to bring their favorite snack or have their favorite beverage on, or when you have a break, hey everybody, like if you want to go grab a snack, bring it with you. We don't mind if you eat on camera, that's fine. People have different feelings on that, that's okay too. So those are some of the positives and negatives of having a virtual instructor-led course. We're going to move on to the last modality, which is asynchronous learning, e-learning. It goes by many names here. But the definition of asynchronous learning is that people are able to access learning training courses at a time that works best for them. You have videos, you have different trainings on a learning management software. People are able to log in and take those trainings at a time that works best for them. That's probably the biggest benefit of asynchronous learning. Secondly, another benefit is that people come in to your company with all different lived experiences, different challenge areas, and different strength areas. When you have asynchronous learning, people are able to move at their own pace. Some people take longer to go through different types of training because they might have less of experience in that area, or that it just takes them longer to learn that particular content. That's great. People can do it at their own pace. Speaking of people kind of having different backgrounds, you can also have people that have a lot of experience in a certain area bypass some of the trainings that you have for your employees because they already know that content, okay? Next, another benefit is that you're able to track what your learners have gone through, where they are at in their learning journey, and you can also do some assessments as a way to check in and say, what are they actually learning? I have a lot of thoughts on online assessments. That is a topic not for today, but you are able to do these little checks and say, hey, what did they learn from this training? And maybe what did they not get? Yeah. A downside of asynchronous learning is that you are not having two people talk to each other. One person is sitting behind a computer and watching a screen. Another downside of asynchronous learning is people can just click through content and not read it. Now, that to me is a dispositional problem of that particular person. And as a company, we're not going to build our content around a low performer, somebody who just clicks through content and doesn't care. We're going to build rich and engaging learning for the people who are going to take the time and have the conversations with people who click through on a one-to-one basis. The last downside of asynchronous learning is you can't bring people together to eat food together. So that's just kind of a downside. All kidding aside, each of these modalities have strengths and weaknesses, benefits and negatives. So what I want you to think about is if you are going to have a training in a particular modality, what are the positives that you can lean into and leverage? So for example, if you are going to have a virtual instructor-led course, and you have a bunch of people log on to their video conferencing software. And they're all with their faces on the screen. If you are not having those people talk to each other and discuss, practice things together, you are missing an opportunity. Turn that content into a video and have people just watch it on a time that works best for them. You need to leverage the fact that everybody is together, because when people are processing and working together, they are learning better. The last thing I want to encourage you to do is think about how can you use a combination of modalities to create an excellent learning experience. So for example, one of the things I love to do is have a pre-course or some type of pre-learning experience that I want all of my learners to go through before the training begins. This is often where I have people kind of like dig into maybe more of the technical side of something, or let's say you have a tool you're about to use and you need everybody to download that software, get their instance up and running, and have them practice a couple of things before they actually get to the training, instructor-led training itself. That way, when you are bringing people together, you're not just learning about like the basics of the tool, you're maybe going through actual workflows. And then you can discuss, practice, get feedback, all in that environment that you can't do when you are in an asynchronous learning experience. So think about how can you combine different modalities to really create a rich learning experience for your learners. At the end of the day, that is what we care about, okay? Whatever modality you use, great, go with it. But at the end of the day, what we care about is what our learners are taking from those experiences. It's the measure that really trumps everything that we do. We're gonna go ahead and wrap up this mini lesson on the 3 different learning modalities that you can use in your organization to ultimately help your employees learn better. Have an awesome day, friends.